Welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show on intellectualradio.com, iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. I'm Mark Wallace, your host and facilitator for this edition of the People Show. We have a jam-packed 2 hours for you. I was just sitting here reading as I was preparing for the show a book that I brought from or by Eddie Glaude Jr. And so he wrote this book, and I recommend this book for everybody. We are the leaders we have been looking for. We are the leaders we have been looking for. That's by Eddie Glaude Jr., who is a professor and at one of the universities, and I'm sitting here looking at as I wrote, I got the book some time ago, and when I got it, read it, but then I picked it up and said, you know, I'm going to start reading it again, and there are so many lessons from this book, from Eddie Glaude, and I might read some excerpts from the book, but I would recommend getting the book, We Are the Leaders That We Are Looking For. So much is going on in the world today. I want to welcome all of you here with me. And it's just you and I for the next couple of hours. Next week, we're going to be talking with some people from the Cook County Assessor's Office, because that is a hot topic of conversation that many people are very confused by. But it is one of my missions going forward this year to put as much information out about the Assessor's Office and the Board of Review and your property taxes and what your exemptions are and how this process and this system works. As difficult of a system as it is, that was created by Ed Burke and Michael Madigan, or certainly changed by Ed Burke and Michael Madigan over the past 40 years to absolutely be an advantage for very wealthy property owners. So, and shifting some of their burdens off onto not so very wealthy people or homeowners, everyday homeowners who have worked hard and should not be paying and subsidizing that. So we're going to be talking about that. So we're going to be talking about a few things tonight, and I want to talk about this ongoing effort of the Trump administration that is working to do all that it can to suppress the vote. Now, one of the things that they're talking about doing, like you see, they now have ICE agents at the airports. I happen to think, in a very strange irony, that is a good thing for them to be at the airport. And I don't mind them being at the airport so that millions of people passing through these airports, where they have refused to rein in ICE and pay these hardworking TSA workers who are not paid a lot of money. These are not people who are paid a lot of money, but they are people who are there really on the front line to make sure that we all are safe and we are traveling with people and preventing people from bringing harm to any of us in the airways. But these people do not get paid a lot of money. And whenever the federal government gets into a tizzy, or whenever that they have some disagreement, then it is always some working group of people within the federal government that has to end up suffering the consequences of that. Or if it's our military, or in this case, the TSA workers. But ICE, these untrained, this police agency that is not operating like a police agency, they're continuing to get paid. But the TSA workers are not being paid. Now, and in this situation, so the president thinks or thought that he was doing something that was strategically in his favor, which he always thinks that he's doing something that is strategically in his favor, which just goes to show you how really out of touch and incompetent this person is. That he's going to put the TSA, or he's going to put ICE agents at the TSA in replace of the TSA workers. These are people who are trained and have to go through a pretty, rigorous training process to become TSA agents. So you can't just show up one day and decide that you're going to be a TSA agent and carry out their roles and responsibilities in keeping us safe. Many of these people are standing around. I don't necessarily believe that the ICE agents that we are seeing at the airports are necessarily the goons that were on the streets. So, but nonetheless, they are still ICE agents. And the idea that Congress, which the Republicans on a bipartisan basis in the Senate, came up with an agreement that Republicans and Democrats supported and sent that over to the House, and Mike Johnson blew it up and decided to continue not to pay this TSA and to keep the government partially shut down. Why did he do that? He did that at the direction of the President of the United States and at the direction of the President of the United States. So because they don't want, or they want for this so-called Save America Act to be passed. Now, if you don't know much about the Save America Act, let me tell you that this is something that is going to hurt Democrats and Republicans if they were able to pass such an atrocious and egregious piece of legislation, telling you that you have to show your form of, you have to go and get your original birth certificate in order for you to be to register to vote, or you have to have a passport. Only about 40% of Americans have passport. I don't have a passport any longer. I don't have a passport. I haven't had a passport since 1996 or something like that. I haven't had a passport. Been saying I was going to go and get one, and I do intend on doing it. But the idea that they would try to make this under the disguise that somehow we are protecting and securing our voting apparatus. Well, the facts are that our voting apparatus is probably one of the most secure apparatuses that we have. What they are actually doing is initiating something that is straight from the Klan when they're talking about putting ICE agents at the voting polls, not to do anything other than to intimidate people before elections come, to intimidate them not to go and vote. That is precisely what the Klan did. Precisely. This is straight out of the playbook of the Klan. that the president is uttering is that they're going to use a Klan-like playbook or strategy or whatever you want to call it, and put ICE agents at the polls because they know that they are going in the wrong direction that Republicans and independents don't like. The fact that they were able to lose in the ruby red state of Florida, in ruby red districts of Florida, won in the backseat of the president of the United States' backyard, where Mar-a-Lago sits. They lost that seat and a second seat in Florida. So 31 seats that the Democrats have flipped. How do they flip them? They flip them because there are independents, Republicans, and Democrats voting together. That's what is happening here. This is not just Democrats that are coming out in these large numbers, although Democrats are coming out in large numbers. But what we see is that Republican voters who are saying, look, I might disagree with Democrats on policy, but what I don't disagree with is that the way that this administration is going is not what we want in our country. It is not what we all have been working to make this a more perfect union, and it's certainly not moving in a direction where it will make a more perfect union. That's not what is happening here. And so you have Democrats, Republicans, and independents voting together. And I like and love the idea that that is sending a message to all of us that we may differ on political philosophy, and we can debate political philosophy, or we can discuss and we can negotiate and come up with ways that will work for the common good of the common person in these United States of America. But what we see happening right now is an absolute travesty. It's an absolute travesty. And so there may be 30% of people who support what is going on, but you're going to find that you can get 30% of people to support anything. But by and large, the larger number, the 65% or 67%, whatever that number is, a larger number, by and large, of the people in this country do not support what we see happening and don't like it. And they may have very well have voted for this administration and voted for Donald Trump for whatever the reasons are. I'm not even here to argue or to rehash whatever the reasons are. I don't understand it. I never will understand it, outside of a little bit of people being frustrated on both sides, Republicans being frustrated with the Republicans, and Democrats being frustrated with the Democrats, and both being or frustrated with the other side. But you should not allow for your frustration to get in the way of all of our futures. Because at the end of the day, what most of us want for things to be better for our communities, we want it to be better for our children, our grandchildren. We want things to get better economically, educationally. There are very important issues. Healthcare is a very important issue. I am learning even more going through a very good friend who is in hospice at this point. They are living right now, but they have terminal case of cancer, and there's nothing else that the doctors are able to do for them. Now, we are grateful that God has kept them here with us way beyond the time that the doctors have said that they will be here, and we are trusting in our faith and our faith commitment. As long as there is breath in her body, we are trusting and we are praying that there will be a miracle for her. But this experience of going through this with her and recognizing how healthcare is restricted in some cases, where she went into hospice care and they took away her TPN, which is her total parenteral nutrition. And that is when a patient can only be fed intravenously through IV. And the Medicare said that they are not going to pay for it anymore. And so until that had gotten worked out and gotten her from hospice back into her status so that her TPN or nutrition could be reinstated. These are important issues that we need to take care of. We need for our government to respond to. We need for our legislators to respond to. We need our legislators to respond to making sure that our infrastructures are working well. There are a lot of working parts that is essential to directly, inextricably tied to our government. Government is necessary. It is necessary. And all of us have a role that we must play in it in order for government to work and for it to work better for all of us. So government is essential. And so we can debate whatever those differences are and whatever those issues are that we may have. But we all have a responsibility to deal with these things in a very sensible way and in a very informed way, not in our emotions or what we feel, because your feelings are not facts. And every thought that you have is not the truth. Only the truth is the truth and the facts are the facts. And it is incumbent upon for us is to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to get the facts, know what the truth is, so that we can be advocating for the best possible policies that are going to be equitable for everybody. You cannot operate in a zero-sum game. Although there are times that we have to be strategically aggressive about certain things, but everything doesn't work our way. Everything doesn't go the way that we want it to go all the time. But we have to have a basis of some civility of saying that only the truth is the truth and only the facts are the facts. Now, we might have a different idea. You may have a different idea about what education looks like. I might have an idea of how to get to a certain place in terms of education. But the fact is that we have a public school system that the majority of Americans attend, and we need to make sure that that public school system is functioning in a way that it is going to give students a great education so that they can move on to matriculate through college or whatever their aspirations are, so that they will be good, productive members in this society that we have in this experiment called the United States of America. So that is what we are required to do. I think that my microphone was off, and so I am so sorry that you all did not get a lot of what I was saying. So, but at any rate, we have to operate ourselves together. This idea of suppressing the vote, this idea of whatever that this out of touch president is doing, and whatever his motives are, whatever his motivations are, they are not the motivations of making things better for the average person in America. That we can attest to, because we see by the evidence of their decisions. And most of America is saying that this is not what we're doing. That's why 2 seats down in Florida got flipped. 2 seats got flipped from red or Republican seats to Democratic seats. And that wasn't just because Democrats are voting. This was Republicans and Democrats and independents that said to the Republicans, you all have been a gatekeeper to destruction, and we are not going to support that just because we are Democrats or just because we are Republicans. We are not going to continue to give you the role of being in charge of our government if this is what you are going to do, is that you're going to give away your power and your authority to keep the administration in check. That's why there are co-equal branches of government, that you have the executive, that you have the judiciary, and that you have the Congress. The 3 co-equal branches of government, and they're all there to keep the other in check. And that's not what we have today. We have as close to a fascist, authoritarian situation going on that has co-opted the Constitution and co-opted the 3 branches of government. And so what is happening across the country, while there's been 31 special elections since January of 2025, since Trump took office in January 20th of 2025 to now, there's been 31 special elections that are in 31 districts of Republican districts that Democratic seats have switched. They flipped them. So that means in 31 areas that we know of, 31 straight to 0 being flipped by the Republicans that are flipping a blue seat to a red. That has not happened. So in all of those 31 seats, again, it's not just Democrats voting. It isn't Democrats that are voting by record numbers. It's Democrats voting in numbers, and it's Republicans voting with Democrats that basically said that this is not where we want for our government to go. This is not what we voted for. And they're saying to their state legislatures and all of these other areas that we're going to be voting with Democratic candidates that support our values. We may not agree on every issue, but we have a fundamental agreement on what we think about following the Constitution, and that we are a country of laws, and we have to follow those laws, including the President of the United States. And what the President of the United States is doing is not what we agree with. It's not what we agree with as Republicans. It's not what we agree with as Democrats. It's not what we agree as independent. But the bottom line is, it's not what we agree with as citizens. That's really what is being said. Whatever the labels that people fly under, which I think in a lot of cases that some of these are distractions. Sometimes they are used to be a distraction. But in this case, I love the idea that we see Democrats and Republicans and independents working together with each other to say, no, we have got to rein this in. We have got to forget about our political differences. And we have to focus on the fundamental of what we believe in our country, that we have rules of law, we believe in the Constitution, we believe in having the right to speak and not to be targeted. We believe in equity, fairness, and justice. That's what we believe in. That's what our core beliefs are. I can argue with you about our political differences, but we don't need to argue with each other about the fact that we want for each other to be free. And we want for our president and the people that we have entrusted with power to operate in such a way that their decisions are focused on the public that they are supposed to be serving. That's why their positions are called public offices. They are in the offices that are and belong to the public. That's why they're called public officials. They're not called private officials. That's where you go to a private company. So I love the idea of what we see happening here is that people from different political, philosophical opinions are united on one front, is that we have to protect the democratic process, and we cannot allow for someone to determine who can and who cannot have access to the ballot. That's not who we are. That's why we do not want to have a king. Now, I've heard people and saw people writing some things that are, I guess, trying to be flippant about it, about that they wouldn't participate in anything that didn't have any kings. Well, this country was founded upon the fact that there were some people who had become annoyed with the British Empire, King George III, and they decided to rebel. And they did rebel, and thus adopted the Declaration of Independence for the United States of America. And they basically said, we reject the monarch. We do not want to live by the rule of a king. So that's how this country was started. That is the fundamental of our democratic process, that we're not interested in a kingdomship or a monarch. We like the idea of the democratic policy called democracy, where every citizen of legal age has the right to vote for its representative, and every citizen has the right to express their criticism of the people in its government. But that's not what we have happening here today. That is trying to be chipped away with. And there are Republicans and Democrats and independents. And all of those people have in common that they are citizens of the United States of America. They love the country that they live in. They want for the country that they live in to be better than what we see being represented. And so you've had people that are crossing the lines, largely Republicans, saying, all right, I want to get our country back. I want to get our country back. I want to get our country back to where we were making progress, making the country better than it was before, not taking it back into the days where we were not as good as we had become, that we have made progress through those periods. As difficult as some of those and many of those battles and accomplishments were to get, there were people who died, there were people who bled, there were people who sacrificed of themselves in order for you and I to participate and enjoy the freedoms that we have now. And it is up to us to continue that fight along. That's what Republicans and independents and Democrats have been saying in these elections. So it's really sending a message that we are not so much divided as we have been disconnected. That is a famous line that comes from one of my mentors, and that was the Reverend Willie Tablin Barrow, who used to always say that we're not so much divided as we are disconnected from each other. But in a real sense, what we see happening is making us be more connected to each other. And maybe that's not going to be on a permanent basis, but at least long enough for us to say we got to get our country back. And then you and I can debate over the things that we disagree on philosophically. But fundamentally, we agree that we want for our country to be a rule and operate by a rule of laws. And we do not want for somebody to think that they are a king or a dictator, as the president of the United States apparently is trying to make himself to be. And it has turned a whole lot of people off. So leading into that, there were these No King Day rallies. Now, these No King Day protests. I, for the longest, have said that in the election of 2024, that by and large, the Black community, men and women, did what it was supposed to do by and large. That we went to the polls, 95% of Black women, 96, 97, whatever the number is, of Black women went to the polls. Some 83% of Black men went to the polls and voted against what we see happening right now. So by and large, the Black community did what it's supposed to do. On the other hand, 53% of white women, 85% of white men, and 39% of Hispanic men went to the polls and voted for what we see happening right now. So my position on that is that it is not the responsibility of our community, because we have saved this country from itself on several occasions, that we have saved this country from itself, fought in every war, starting with the Revolutionary War, died in every war, all the way up to the war in Vietnam. And still men came home and had to sit on the back of the bus. So in this instance, where Black folks did what we were supposed to do by and large, and I don't want to hear about the number of Black folks who stayed home and didn't vote, because there were far more white folks that stayed home and did not vote than there were Black folks that stayed home and did not vote. There were 83 million people who did not vote. If 83, I read an article, if the did not vote people If the did not vote people were a candidate, they would have won the election in a landslide. In a landslide, we would have gotten 265 seats to Donald Trump's 178 and to Kamala Harris's 98. It would have been a landslide if the did not vote segment was an actual candidate, right? And in that 83 million, far more of those people were white than there were blacks that did not vote. So I don't even want to hear about, black folks didn't go to the poll and vote. Yes, we did. The largest voting bloc of any ethnic group showed up in November and voted against what we see happening now. However, now, that being said, I didn't believe and still don't believe that we should be the ones on the front lines in the demonstration. I support the demonstrations, even watched the demonstration, even donated money to Indivisible so that they could get their placards and water and whatever other. I donated some money to Indivisible. I will donate money again if they're going to do another one. I believe that our support is the support that we should gird them up by supporting, donating $5, $10, $15, $20, whatever you're able to contribute so that they can make up the placards and have the resources that they need to do, get the permits, whatever, to go out and doing these demonstrations all over the country. I understand there were about 8 to 9 million people, the largest single demonstrations of the history of this country. I think that's all well and good. And I support it, and we should support it. But I do not believe that we should be on the front lines of that, because we were on the front lines when we showed up November the 5th of 2024. So we did our part. And I believe that this is a role of our white brothers and sisters that need to be on the front line, and they are on the front line. But that being said, while we're doing and seeing the demonstrations and the outpouring and demonstrating to a authoritarian president that is completely out of touch with the vast majority of the country and the citizens, who probably does not care, then it's important. It is important to show that type of a picture, of an image to the president, that this is a repudiation of what it is that he represent, because that's not representation of who the American people are. And so, we had people who were out that were, first of all, let me just say hello to all of you who are online, those of you who are back home, the Rosetta Guy and Carol and Elmore White, thank you very much. And everybody who is on YouTube, that is joining us on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Instagram, and those of you who are listening on intellectualradio.com and iHeart Radio. Thank you all for being here. But I believe that the No King's Day protests and demonstrations are important. I believe that they are super important, and we're watching some and gathering some clips, and we're trying to prepare for the show. But I believe that by and large, because this president, if in fact our community were out there on the front lines, if we were out there on the front lines, because of his out of control and outwardly disdain for anybody who he thinks that is not white, I wouldn't be surprised if he wouldn't have put the National Guard out there, if there was a large swath of black folks out there on the front line. I'm sure that there were black folks that were participating. But by and large, these are demonstrations where white folks are saying to the president, we reject you. We reject what you're doing, and we're going to continue to do it. And I support that rejection. And I will send them a few dollars of support and a few dollars more to support. And I would urge any of you, brothers and sisters, to do the same thing, to support that action. So we support what they're doing, but our level of support should not be on the front lines. They should not be on the front lines. When I have done something that, if we're driving and I drive down the street and I hit your car, I run into your car with my car, whether it be by accident or not. If I damage your car, I am responsible for making you whole and getting your car repaired or replaced, if that be the case. But I am responsible for making you whole. And I believe that this is not something that the black community did. We didn't do this. We showed up and we voted. Again, I don't want to hear about the ones who voted for him that didn't vote for us, that sort of thing. Some 16, 17% of black men voted for Donald Trump. And I have my concerns with some things that was done by Mr. West, Professor West, and and I've talked about that, so I don't think that I want to go off on that. But really, I believe that they have a much greater role in being on the front lines. Now, this is no way in the world are we not supposed to engage in any way. We must participate. Oh, yes, we must participate by supporting what they're doing, by chipping in and supporting what they're doing. Certainly, I don't think that we should be on the front lines. When I looked at like this clip that I'm going to play here,
your strength and your commitment told us that this is still America. And this reactionary nightmare and these invasions of American cities will not stand.
I'm here because I'm worried about my children and my grandchildren. I'm tired. We're exhausted. This brings me hope. I have so much hope here, and we can change this. Our government is not going to do it. It has to be we the people.
What we provide is mockery to the king. And we call this part of the Mock and Awe tour. And that's really about just taking authoritarianism and making fun of it, which they hate. And that's what we're doing.
And no one, not the bully in chief, not the racist in chief, not the wannabe king, no one is above the law. They want us to be afraid that there's nothing we can do to stop them. But you know what? They are wrong, dead wrong, because we know better. Millions of us are not afraid to know our rights and exercise them, to stand up for each other and our hard-fought freedoms.
That was just some parts of this latest No King's Day protests. And I literally take my hat off to Indivisible and the organizer of Indivisible, who have put together this enormous repudiation and rejection of what we see coming out of this administration. And I think that we in the Black community should have just as much organized effort, though in a different way in this particular sense. But we have to be just as much engaged, not sitting on the sidelines, but we have to be engaged in this process strategically. We have to be engaged in this process, making sure that we are supporting Democratic candidates, even who are running for, whether it's on the local level, whether it's on the state level, and on the federal level. It all matters. It all matters. We lost some 260 some odd seats from 2010 until now because that we, when I say we, those of us on the Democratic side, many of our representatives were out of touch with what the American people were looking for in terms of representation, in terms of for fighting for equity and fighting for the equitable resources and those things, the core values that we believe in as people who are Democratic voters. And so, because we seem to have shifted, and there was a blur that people, or the American people, did not see any distinction between Democrats and Republicans, and that they felt that Democrats were not fighting for the everyday person. We paid a serious price for it. We took it for granted, whatever the case may be. We lost 284 seats on local and state legislatures around the country. But we're making a reversal of that, and hopefully got the cobwebs out of our heads that we can see clearly on what those things are the American people want for their representatives to be fighting for and to deliver on those areas for education, economics, careers, healthcare, protection for our children, protection for women. And yes, reparations. Reparations, for me, reparations encompasses all of those things. It encompasses all of those things. It encompasses it's economics that are tied to everything. Economics is tied to our educational system. Economics is certainly tied to the security of our people. Economics is tied to the healthcare of our people. So reparations, that people can call it whatever that you want to label it. I believe in it, but I believe that we also have to understand that it is inextricably tied to all of those essentials that I talked about. It's tied to housing, making sure that there is equitable housing. It's tied to contracts. It's tied to making sure that we have the dollars supporting our educational institutions, and making sure that we have access to capital for those who want to pursue a business. Absolutely. So reparations is tied to all of that for me. All of that. I may not call it that, but I absolutely believe in it and think that we need to be fighting for it, and we have to fight for it in very strategic ways to make sure that it is happening. That we're getting the road. But none of that will we be able to accomplish if we are operating with these ideologies that we are operating on some soul island by ourselves. What we see happening in the indivisible marches and demonstration and protest, what it is demonstrating to us is that we have serious power when we use that power collectively, whether it be on a local level or whether it be as widespread as a national level. But we need to be organized. And certainly it is important, or more important, for us to organize on a local level, because that is where you're going to make your greatest gains. That is where public policy is largely impacted, and public policy largely impacts our lives. That's why I believe that it is important for us to put ourselves together. Now, I saw a clip that I had seen some years ago, and someone reposted it, and I saw it on my Facebook. It was a clip by Dick Gregory, probably 30 years ago, that Dick Gregory made this statement to, I forget the reporter's name, but this is Dick Gregory, and this has got to be over 30 years ago that he made this statement. And I saw this a long time ago, but I forgot about it until somebody the other day posted it on my Facebook page. Take a look and listen to what Dick Gregory says that changed his whole perspective and changed his life.
Do you believe that? Do you believe the American political system is sophisticated enough to deal with complex issues?
No, I believe it's too unethical, and that's where I believe it's going to swallow up itself, and I believe we're going to look around and have mass chaos in this country.
Chaos? You're talking about violence?
I'm talking about violence, yes, because white folks are not going to tolerate being out of work. White folks not going to tolerate being told they cannot own a house. White folks not going to tolerate being told they can't go to Florida and get them some sun, and that's just what's fixing to happen. They ain't never had to worry about me, because when I tore up something, I tore up my neighborhood. White folks will blow up the bridge, they will blow up the bank, and I'm saying if we don't look and see where this country is headed, because you have white folks in this country that's never been without a job, that's never been without a good job. When I got a good job, I was surprised. I never expected it. When I found out I was going to college, I was surprised. I was the hero in my neighborhood. It's expected for white folks to go to college, and all it wants, this lifestyle. There's only two people that can survive this country. The Indians will be able to survive it because they ain't never had gas up on them. They ain't never had a thermostat to turn down, and black folks might be able to survive it, provided we can get out all that silliness and stop trying to emulate something that we're not.
You keep talking as if something dire is going to happen. Chaos if the economy falls, a revolution if the political apparatus collapses. And yet, I don't see much evidence of that. I see instead resignation, disillusionment, a retreat into self-centeredness, the me decade. I don't see any sense of the flames that might flicker into real change.
I wouldn't see it neither if I wasn't watching the economy. And I'm not saying that we were cleaner back in that last depression or pure, but conditions forced me to live next to you as my brother, so I knew what dinner was. I don't know who lived next to me now. I don't know who's upstairs. I don't know who's downstairs. I know one thing, every other person got a gun. And when you live in a nation that would squawk more about registering their rifle than registering their children, then we're in trouble. We are completely in trouble. And I think a 91-year-old white woman said it better than anyone's ever said it. And that was this past summer. This white woman in Houston, Texas got arrested for shoplifting, and her picture went around the world. And Americans sent that woman $25,000, and she held a press conference and said, thanks, but no thanks. I don't need your $25,000. I need you to change the conditions that reduces people like me into shoplifting. And I love that because it embarrassed me, because that old white woman upset me, because if my grandmother was alive in 91 and got caught shoplifting and white America sent her $20,000, she'd have got on TV praising God and talking about what a good country this is. But that woman put it right. I need you to change the conditions that reduces me down. And that's a funny thing, because when you get people that's Christians that really believe in God, that get reduced down to stealing, then you lose that thing. And if America is not watching, we in trouble.
You know, that was a very profound statement that he made then. And the conditions are the same. It's a very profound statement that he made back then, but it's very profound today. And and one of the things that he said is about what the white woman said to him is that, or not said to him, but said to the press conference, no, I don't want your handout. I don't want for you. This was a 91-year-old white woman, 91 years of age. At 91, she identified with the system and said, you need to change the inequitable system that produces the kinds of circumstances that we find ourselves in. That is why it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we are paying attention to where the problem lies. We do the same thing in our own community. Not that anybody is condoning drug dealing. Anybody is condoning, the killing and murdering and raping and any of those negatives that impact our communities. Not condoning any of it, but we must keep it into context, into perspective of asking, why is this happening pervasively in our communities? Why? Why is it so easy for a person, a young Black person who has no job, who has no skills, why is it so easy that they can get a sophisticated weapon that's easily dropped off in our community? Why is it so easy for them to have access to drug and drug dealing and all of those negative things? Why is that so easy? Black folks don't own the first coca crop, don't farm the big farms. Now they might, because of this, ridiculous legalization of drugs that some people support. I don't. And under the disguise that it's, economic parity, which I think is just a bunch of, again, distraction and baloney. But I digress, and let me just get back. So why is it so easy for our children and for our young people? And why do they feel like it is necessary for them to do it, or it's their only alternative, or that the risk outweigh the outcomes because of their circumstances that have been produced? And that is what that woman was really saying at 91 years of age in Houston, Texas, more than 30 something odd years ago, that he saw that. And that woman said, I don't want your $25,000. I want for this country. And maybe that's why she went in and shoplifted. Maybe that's what her motivation was. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't her motivation. Maybe she was hungry and she didn't have any way to feed herself. She didn't have any money. Because if you were hungry and you didn't have any money and you didn't have anybody to turn to Don't tell me with your pious, self-righteous self that you could not be seduced or lured out of desperation to feed yourself, because anybody in a desperate situation that is breathing and hungry and can't get bread or water or food is going to find a way to get it, not because they desire to do wrong, but because they are hungry in the circumstances that they are in. And there is no good reason, there is no reason that in the richest, wealthiest nation, where we're 5% of the population, 4% of the world's population, but we are the richest by far than any other developed nation in this world, that we have people who are not cared for by healthcare, people who don't have a right to an education, and people who don't have a right to the basic needs in this country. These are situations that are produced, and they are getting worse. That they are getting worse. So it was, again, profound statement when he said it back then, and it is just as prevalent and just as profound as now. And this is what we see happening, is that, and we have to ask the question, why? And we have to hold all of them accountable for delivering. We have to hold Democrats, we have to hold Republicans, we have to hold independents, whoever they are in public office, we have to hold them accountable to deliver. That's why it's important for all of us to bring ourselves out of these idiosyncratic, teeny-tiny differences that keep us split from working with each other for the very common things that we all believe in for our communities. We've got to get beyond those egocentral distractions that keep us from holding these people accountable that we have entrusted with power. We've entrusted these people with power. And we're just going to fight each other and allow for them to run off with the spoils and give it to whomever it is that they want to, and leave the rest of us high and dry. That's on us. So we have to do what that woman said, is we have to make sure that the system is fixed, that it stopped producing the kinds of conditions that reduces a person to becoming addicted to drugs, that reduces a person to drug dealing and drug selling. These are conditions that are produced, and we have to get to the very core and stop allowing for the people that we have sent to our governmental seats to put forth legislation and to put forth the kind of strategic public policy that's going to address those ills that continue to plague our community. Government was never built and was never made for the purposes of making people billionaires. That was never the intention of government. That was never the intention of the founders. Was not the intention of the founders. The intention of the founders but what we have now is that we have a president who the only thing that he talks about when it comes to economics is talking about, oh, how many billions that we have raked in and trillions of dollars that we're raking. Well, trillions of dollars for who? Billions of dollars for who? That's not for the average everyday working person. Certainly not for poor people. That's not who you're talking to. That's not who he is talking to. And when we allow for them to continue to operate in this way, then we are abdicating our role and our responsibilities as citizens. And we're basically saying that I am okay if we are operating in such a way that we are complicit with it. We're operating in such a way, whether we are engaging or not engaging, we are basically saying that we are enabling what is going on. So that means that you and I have to do some serious soul searching. We have to do some serious reflecting. And, you know, I don't want to hear about it's not that easy, or, you know, I have to do this and I have to do that. We all have responsibilities and roles. That's why it's important for many of us to get together so that there is no one person who feels overtaxed or overwhelmed, but we are addressing all of those areas that are concerned about making sure that we are having an egalitarian, an agrarian community. If more of us got together, we could address every single issue that plagues our community, from education to economics and everything in between that is important. If we would do what our role and our responsibility is bringing ourselves out of the doldrums of what I call individualism, which is the toxic cancer to our survival. Individualism is a toxic cancer to our survival. So if you're one of these people who are running around here talking about, well, you know, I stand on my own 2 feet and I do my own thing, well, you're not doing anything but being destructive towards your own people, even though you think that you are doing something for your people. If you are thinking that you are stepping out on your own and you're not willing to work together with more of your people and bring what talents that you have and what information that you have in a corporate collective manner, you are being destructive and playing into that same destruction for your people. So individualism is a complete toxic cancer. So if you run around here talking about, I do my own thing, just remember, doing your own thing is harming your own people, harming your own community, because none of us are an island unto ourselves, and none of us are successful at making any progress unto ourselves. Stokely Carmichael, who later became Kwame Ture, wrote these words where he said, "No Black person in this country makes any advancement solely based on his or her talent or worth. All individual advancement is based on mass struggle. We make no progress in this world without shedding our blood. Therefore, brothers and sisters, your advancement and success does not belong to you. It belongs to the people. The people. And if you do not use your success or advancement for the benefit of the people or your people, it's a betrayal of the people who shed their blood for you." People like Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Malcolm X Ralph Abernathy, other people who came before us, who sacrificed of themselves, and others that we don't name, can't name. But you and I are in a very different position in terms of our abilities and what we have available to us to make a difference. But if we're running around with this ideology of individualism, we are going to continue to fall back as a people. As a people. Individually, there are people individually that are going to always have example of people individually doing well. But I'm talking about corporately lifting and elevating our community at every sector. That takes a corporate collective will and willingness of us to come together. That's why it's so important. I mean, you have people in this government, this president, and this government that are trying to turn all of that black, trying to turn all that back. And putting up all of these roadblocks that they're putting forth with Project 2025. Told us exactly what it is that they were going to do. Russell Vogt, who is now the director of the Office of Budget and Management, who did an interview with two investigative reporters, that he thought that he was meeting with some Republican donors. And he talked about in various parts of this interview, and I'm going to play a couple of them, where he talked about what their actual plans are in Trump's 5th year in office, which this is Trump's 5th year in office. This is what Russell Vogt said way before Trump won re-election. This is Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation, that are the master supporters of Project 2025, of which Russell Vogt was one of two people who was the co-author of Project 2025. And this is what he said in this interview, that he thought that he was meeting with Republican donors. This is why it's important that we have got to get our priorities in place on a local level, because it is important, because whatever happens on a local level is going to spawn nationally. And we see what they're trying to do on a national level. But take a look at this clip, and I'm going to show some others that Russell Vogt, in this secret, undercover meeting that he thinks that he's meeting with Republican donors that are going to make money. And this is an undercover political investigative report.
This year has been predominantly now getting ready for a year 5 of a Trump administration. We've got about 350 different documents that are regulations and things of that nature.
So he's talking about 350 different documents where they have put together these executive orders. They've already written them. This is a part of Project 2025. And of course, when we started talking about it, and I think we started talking about it too late, because when we came apprised of it, nobody was making a thing of Project 2025 I think it was Taraji P. Henson, who said it at one of the awards, that she started talking about Project 2025, and it started coming to light. Now, they were very strategic and about what they were doing, and they're still doing it, and doing it on steroids. And when they're talking about when they're talking about the president winning, they're talking about the president winning. This is the secretary of the FCC talking about, bragging about going after the news media, where in all of our lifetimes, none of us even knew who the head of the FCC was. Had no idea who that person was. And here this person is out bragging about it at the CPAC meeting. Take a look at it.
President Trump, when he ran for office, he ran directly at the fake news media. So many other politicians and Americans simply gave way to the legacy national media. They let the legacy media set the narrative. And President Trump smashed the facade. He said, you don't get to decide what we say, what we think, how we're going to vote inside the voting booth. President Trump took on the fake news media, and President Trump is winning. Look at the results so far. PBS defunded, NPR defunded, Joy Reid gone from MSNBC, Sleepy Eye Chuck Todd gone, Jim Acosta gone, John Dickerson gone, Colbert is leaving, CBS is under new ownership, and soon enough CNN is going to have new ownership as well. So we're not...
So this is significant.
We're not at the point yet, of raising the mission accomplished flag, but President Trump is taking on the fake news media, and President Trump is winning.
This is their posture, and they're never letting up on it. I have to give them credit for that. I certainly have to give whatever this is that they call the extremists. I don't know that it can identify as a Republican Party, and certainly they have co-opted the Republicans, those who are really, believe in the so-called conservative or Republican values, but are not willing to stand up to this extremism, so that they have foregone that. But this is what you have, is that they're openly talking about how President Trump, who is going after the media, who's gone after people like Stephen Colbert and Joy Reid and all of that sort of thing, getting rid of PBS, and this is what it is that they're trying to do out of the Russian playbook, is to completely control the media. Anybody who doesn't say anything that is pleasant about the president is attacked, and the president goes after the CEO. It is still unnerving that you have so many CEOs that have bowed and have succumbed to this administration. In ways that are just very difficult to comprehend. That was Brendan Carr, who was the head of the FCC, that the president put into place and put in as his henchman at the FCC to go after news media. However, when we push back, there is nobody that's stronger than the American public when we push back, and when we push back in large numbers. They went after CBS and went after Stephen Colbert. CBS cancels the late night show and blames it on some other numbers or whatever. And ever since they did that, his numbers have been going through the roof. Then they tried to go after Jimmy Kimmel. But the American public had enough. And the American public said to Disney, this is what we will do to you. And within a matter of hours, Disney lost $6 billion in shares. They were plummeting. People were canceling their Disney subscriptions in droves. And it started by one group, I believe it was one small group of women who started it. And it completely went viral. And over a day or two, they got the rest, or certainly a large swath of us, to do the same. The fundamental is the same. The fundamental is the same. We have the power. We have the power to push back. We are not helpless. We are not powerless. We have the power to say no and to reject that we don't. But we have to do it, and we have to do it in a very collective way. This is not about individual piousness, propping up any one person. This is about lifting us all up. This is about lifting us all up and spreading this wide tent to make sure that the foundation is secure for those who come behind us. For your children, for our grandchildren, for our communities. I don't think that we have to be dead in the ground not to see any of the progress. I believe that if we were to galvanize ourselves together, that we can make fundamental change, starting on the local level, that can spawn all the way to the national level. Right here where we are, if we were to organize ourselves, if we were to collaborate ourselves with just a couple 100,000 of us here in Chicago and Cook County, with the vast number of the African-American population that we have in Chicago and in Cook County, and even in some of the surrounding areas, if we were just to collectively cooperate with each other, we could literally determine whatever it is that we want to do. Now, I want to talk about the thing that is that's been the hot topic, and that has been these property taxes. There's a lot of confusion about whether it is the assessor's office and who's the blame and all of that. There was an article that I read earlier today that talked about property taxes. This was an article that was done by WBEZ that talks about how property taxes, which are driven by that's driven by TIF districts and school funds, which outpace inflation and wages, according to the county treasurers. The county's property tax levy has increased from $6.8 billion in 1995 to $19.2 billion in 2024, or twice the rate of inflation, according to this new report, Cook County Treasurer Maria Pappas' offices. If it had remained on track with inflation, the county's levy would be closer to $10.1 billion. What does that mean? The levy is that of all of the different agencies that are made up in the county, that they produce a budget, that they turn this into the Cook County Board, and they establish this levy of how much money that they need in order to manage their agency. That's what's called the levy. And in order to fund that levy, they have to go and collect those dollars from the taxpayers, from us. So we are really the biggest creditors to most governments, whether it's on the local level, whether it's on the state level, whether it's on the federal level. We are the biggest creditors. They owe us, meaning. So in this article, they talked about how property taxes outpaced inflation and grew well above the wage of growth over the last 30 years, shooting up nearly 182%, according to a new report from the Cook County Treasurer's Office. The county's property tax levy has increased from $6.8 billion in 1995 to $19.2 billion in 2024, or twice the rate of inflation. Pappas' office blames loopholes in the state property tax extension limitation law, which was designed to limit tax increases to the rate of inflation, or 5%, whichever is less. But local officials took advantage of the loopholes, the law's loopholes, to enact tax increases that substantially exceed that limit. And 94 of the county's 135 municipalities aren't bound by these laws, which includes ours. The report says the biggest culprit is what we call the levy. She said in an interview on WBEZ, locally, we have to cut down how much we are spending. Predominantly Black neighborhoods on the south and west sides of Chicago were the hardest hit by the impact. The Oakland neighborhood, just north of Kenwood, saw a 636% increase in property tax bills between 1995 and 2024, so over a period almost 30 years, while the East Garfield Park saw a 447% increase per the Treasurer's Office data. The Lower West Side, West Garfield, and North Lawndale all saw increases of over 200%. In the suburbs, the closest comparison was in unincorporated Riverside, which saw bills shoot up about 235% in the same time frame. Phoenix, Illinois, which is to the south, saw an increase of 192%. So in an email, the Illinois Department of Revenue Director David Harris said the agency continues to make progress on a property tax study required by law, which directs it and other state agencies to evaluate the state's property tax system and recommend possible improvements to its associated processes. Now, schools countywide, which account for about 50% of the total tax bill, about 55% of your tax bill goes to public schools. We're not arguing about making sure that our public schools are supported. We just have to find another way to fund our public schools. Also, there have been demands skyrocketed 189% to $6.9 billion. Taxes imposed by Chicago public schools and other city governments rose from about $2.9 billion in 1995 to nearly $8.9 billion in 2024. And a large part due to public pensions, funding mandates. The report provided suburban municipalities added about $6.3 billion for funds. CPS has demanded even more money because of pension costs, which now total about $662 million a year. The city district is on the hook for 65% of its own pension costs, while suburban school district pays 2% because the state picks up the rest of them. Now, this whole thing that has happened, what we have done is that we have turned the assessor's office and we have turned the Board of Review back over into the hands of the corrupt Barrios Hines days that preceded Fritz Kagi. And so they were able to message out false information and you bought it. And now there's nothing that we can do about that because the election has taken place. So Patrick Hines is going to be the new assessor, which he will take office in early December 1st. And you have Liz, I forget her last name, but you have Liz Nicholson, George Cardenas, and Larry Rogers Jr. All three of those are the Democratic machines endorsed candidates. And they all now have full control of the Board of Review. What does this mean? This means that there will be this lopsided, unfair assessed valuations of lowering the assessed valuations of wealthy commercial properties and wealthy multi-million-dollar properties and over-assessing the moderate homeowner on the south and west side of Chicago. That is what is getting ready to take place. If we are not vigilant about holding their feet to the fire, that means that we have to attend meetings. We have to find out when these meetings are, and we're going to have to attend those meetings so that we send a message and a mandate to Larry Rogers Jr., to George Cardenas, and Liz Nicholson that we are no longer in the dark about that little office that is no longer an innocuous office. We're bringing it to light, and we have to be a part of it because that office has the last word when it comes to assessments. So in this case, you can't cry over spilled milk. Fritz Kagi was in there for 2 terms, and Fritz Kagi was fighting the General Assembly. Well, you just saw in the article, it says that the law needs to change. This was all put into place by Michael Madigan, Ed Burt, and others, tax appeal attorneys. And so Fritz Kagi decides that he is going to fight for homeowners and to bring the assessed valuations more in line. However, once Fritz Kagi sets those assessed valuations, which the assessor's job is to determine what your property, like your property, would sell for in the particular area or market that your property is in. Now, there are more than 1.8 million parcels of land within that body that has to be assessed. So it's not very difficult, but it's difficult in the sense that you have 1.8 million parcels of properties that vary to determine what that particular property would sell for. Now, there are commercial properties where the assessor was saying these assessments are out of balance. Too many commercial properties are being under assessed and too many residential properties are being over assessed. We've got to balance this out. So therein comes the opposition to Fritz Kagi. Fritz Kagi sets the assessment valuations of what your property could sell for and what your assessed valuations would be. They hire an attorney, and the attorney goes to the tax appeal process, which is the Board of Review. The Board of Review votes in many cases to reverse the assessor's findings, and the assessor has no course whatsoever, no course. That's why the tax appeal attorneys were paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to Larry Rogers Jr. and hundreds of thousands of dollars to George Cardenas. But we decided to reelect them again. Not only reelecting them, but to put it on steroids, because they now have control over both chambers, the assessor's office as well as the Board of Review. Nothing we can do about that, but what we can do about it is we can participate and show up to these meetings, find out when the meetings are, and we are working to do that. That's why it is incumbent upon us. It is incumbent upon us for us to get ourselves together and to work together in order for us to hold these people in check. That's what it is going to take all of us to do. Now, we are talking about this every week at our meeting, but we're also working to find out how we can galvanize more Black people to work together, to come together as a block of Black voters to address issues, as well as becoming a block that will be impactful at the ballot box. But if we became a block, we could be impactful at the legislative level. Why can we be impactful at the legislative level if we organize as a block? If we organize as a block, that means a couple 100,000 of us. If we had a couple 100,000 of us in a block, every person who is in a political office is going to take note of that. Because if we do get 200,000 people, we're not getting 200,000 people from one little cluster. We're getting 200,000 people who cross the breadth and width of the districts where we live, which means that we'll have 5,000 to 10,000 people of every ward, every district, which means with that number of people, we can determine the outcome of so many seats. And because you have that kind of power, you'll have people who are in office right now that will recognize and identify with that. And then we will be able to have an audience of anybody that we would want to call on. And we could hold those persons accountable and make the kinds of assessments and demands that we want for all of those political leaders. Look, you've got 22 members of the House and state representatives offices that are Black. 22 people in the House of Representatives. 10 10 state senators that we have. We have a Black Speaker of the House. We have 20 Black aldermen, 6 Black Cook County Board Commissioners, a Black mayor, a Black board president of the Cook County Board, Black lieutenant governor, a Black city treasurer, recorder of deeds, and the clerk, Black. We have over 193 Black people who are elected to office. What is the problem? The problem is that those persons, many of them, are a part of the Democratic machine. And until we put ourselves in a position as voters with real power and real influence, which means that we have to bring ourselves together in a large number and stick together, work together as a block, and send that message to every public chamber, the county, the city, the state, and on the federal level. Every one of them will get that message. And I guarantee you, we will see before our own eyes what that power looks like. We're seeing it happen now. We're seeing it happen in the streets that we saw this past weekend, the No King's Day March. We see that. And you're going to see some people who are in elective office that are going to make a calculation decision to say that if they want to get reelected, that they're going to have to start representing differently. Even though there's been some 30 some odd people who are deciding that they are not going to seek reelection because they're afraid of what will happen at the ballot box. They don't want to experience the humiliation. That is what every public official is completely afraid of. It is their worst nightmare to think that they could be in an election and lose to that election. It is, I'm told, it is a horrible feeling for anybody. Why, that because you lose so publicly. I get it. So we must and need to use strategically what we have available to us to make the kind of changes that we say that we want. If we don't, then we must be okay with the conditions by which we are living, those conditions that are produced, that we are okay with it, because that's essentially and effectively what we are saying. If we are not willing to do the one thing that gives us the boasted power to do, is to coordinate ourselves together, determine a direction, and determine a agenda. And then we work towards getting those issues addressed. That is what real collective power is. Anything else is of sinking sand. So this idea that I'm pulling myself up by my own bootstraps, or I stand on my own 2 feet, good. We all get a chance to stand up on our own 2 feet. But our 2 feet should be about helping our people. And thusly helping our people, we certainly can't help but to help ourselves. So that's where we really need to be. I mean, look at what is happening with the farmers. Last year, 315 farmers lost their farms. 315. Today, there are 53 farmers filing Chapter 12 every single day in this country. 53. I read a report, and someone did a illustration through a video of what's happening with the farmers.
In 2025, farm bankruptcies hit their highest rate in 5 years. 315 families filed Chapter 12. Corn crashed to $4 a bushel. The gap between what it cost to grow a crop and what the market paid exploded to 34 points by October. America lost 15,000 farms in a single year. Farmers die by suicide at 3.5 times the national average. Behind every statistic is a family that spent generations building something they will never get back. And while they went under, the buyers were already lined up. Institutional farmland holdings tripled between 2009 and 2022. Bill Gates is now the largest private farmland owner in the country, with 275,000 acres across 17 states. Vice President J.D. Vance invested in Acre Trader, a platform that profits when distressed farms hit the market. That platform was acquired in 2025, the same year farm distress peaked. The same people setting policy are cashing in on the collapse. Trump's tariffs wiped out China as a buyer of U.S. soybeans overnight. Fertilizer and equipment tariffs cost farmers $958 million in 8 months. The announced $12 billion bailout covered less than 35 cents on every dollar of the $34.6 billion in actual losses. In Trump's first trade war, the top 1% of bailout recipients averaged $183,000 each. The bottom 80% got less than $5,000. And 20,000 USDA staff have been fired or forced out, leaving farmers with no one to call. This is not policy failure, it is a transfer. 44 million acres of farmland are projected to change hands in the coming years. The administration simultaneously tried to sell 3 million acres of public land to private developers. 88 million acres of protected forests have had safeguards stripped. The land that generations of Americans farmed, hunted, and called their own is being liquidated. And the buyers are not your neighbors. They are billionaires, hedge funds, and the politicians who serve them.
That's what happened with our farmers, and our farmers overwhelmingly voted for this administration. So in every sector across this country, this administration has demonstrated that they are not concerned about the common person. They're not concerned about the farmers. They're certainly not concerned about the poor. They're not concerned about the working class. Look at what's happening. They're not concerned about the working class. Just, just picture the idea that you're sending an agency that needs to be reined in to the airport to be in the face of people who you are blocking finances for because you want to give unfettered, without any type of accountability. I am not one of these people who say that we have to defund ICE. I'm one of these people who believe that we have laws by which we have to comply with. People who want to come to the country, they have to come to the country in a legal way. People who get into the country, we also have to respond in a legal way, in the constitutional way. Constitution says that all persons have right to due process. All persons, not all citizens, all persons. So they have to follow the law. And we have to follow the law. If they don't follow the law, then we have to follow the law in terms of either deporting them or holding them accountable. So I'm not one of these people who believes that we need to abandon all of our laws, although some of our laws need to be reformed, like the law that says that because you get convicted of a crime, that you lose your right to vote. I don't think that that should be the law. I think that law should be done away with. That if you are an American citizen, whether you are someone who is going before the penal system to be held accountable or to be tried, that you are still an American citizen. You should not lose your citizenship. You should certainly not you lose your right to your voice to vote. We need to end slavery once and for all. Slavery is not ended in this country. I'm not sure if you all knew that that is the case, that slavery is not ended in this country. Well, you say, well, then if slavery is not ended, when is slavery legal? I'm glad you asked. In the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution, in the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution, slavery as an institution is illegal in all countries worldwide under international law. In the United States, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, ratified in 1865, abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. This exception clause means that forced labor is still legal in the United States of America for individuals who have been convicted of a crime. That part of the Constitution was one of the first questions that I raised to a law professor. And there are very few people who talk about that exception, because I don't think that you should be subjected to slavery because you have been convicted of a crime. If you're convicted of a crime, you certainly have to be held accountable for those convictions. But I do not believe that slavery should be one of those legal statutes. I believe that it should be eliminated completely, because what that does is it allows for them to work you as a slave while incarcerated or in custody. And I do not believe that, and for whatever reason, that is not being talked about. That is a part of reparations. These are the policies, is why it's so important for us to get beyond our idiosyncratic, teeny-tiny, itty-bitty differences, so that we can really use our energy and we can really use our collective strength to make significant change. I'm not talking about just some, itty bitty. I mean, we can make significant public policy change only if we worked together. We could make the very change that many of you want and are working in smaller groups on very important issues. That if we would just band ourselves together as a block, continue to doing the work that you're doing, but you lead us in that effort, and as a block, you have the block behind you leading us in whatever that effort is, whatever that issue is that you're leading us, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's economics, finances, criminal justice reform, whatever that issue is, a collective body that we can make drastic, and I mean drastic change in public policy. It's never happened before in terms of our own community, that we organize ourselves together in such a way that we will be a model to other communities like ours around the country. That is how we are going to fundamentally make change. And we see it happening in these elections. One of the things that I saw on the report about the No King's Day rally, that 60% of the people who RSVP'd that will participate in these No King Day rallies came from red rural areas. 60%, most of which vote Republican. So Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all saying enough with what this administration is doing. What I'm saying to us, what I'm saying to our community, we're not about being anti-anybody community. This is not about being anti-white. It is not about being anti-Hispanic. It is not about being anti-Arab. It is not about being anti-Jews. It is not about being anti-anybody. What we are being anti is to injustice. And what we are tethering ourselves to, and what we are being pro is about bringing ourselves together so that we can hold those persons that we have in office, that we have entrusted with power, that we have entrusted with the responsibility to deliver to our communities. That is what we must do if we are going to see significant change for our communities. We can do that here that will impact our communities all across the country. All across the country. Why? Because it has never been done before. We've mobilized ourselves around issues. We've mobilized ourselves around, police brutalities that have taken place. Laquan McDonald, George Floyd, those things that we have organized ourselves around. We've organized ourselves around all of these police misconducts and police shootings of Black men around the country. We've mobilized ourselves. We've mobilized ourselves on these things. But if we organize ourselves, we together can make a radical, radical difference. All right, that's going to do it for me tonight. Just remember that we cannot operate in despair. We cannot afford to sit on the sideline. We've all got to get actively engaged in the process. Until next time, I'll see you next week on Monday night edition of The People Show on intellectualradio.com, iHeartRadio.